Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Welcome back to my channel on Everything Books. Today we're going to be discussing the book Aesop's Fables, the signature classics version from Barnes & Noble. What we'll do in this video is I'll quickly show you what this book looks like, the overall quality and things like that, and then we'll discuss this book in detail as far as general impressions and a general review. So Aesop's Fables, for those of you that are not familiar with it, many of you have grown up with these stories as a child. A lot of different versions of this book has been put out guided towards children, where they handpick and select certain stories like the tortoise and the hare, the miser, things like that that are really geared towards children. So you probably grew up with many of these stories or heard about different stories, or you've heard fables or the moral of the story in different contexts, but never actually have read the book in its entirety. So what I did about a month ago was I went to Barnes & Noble, kind of just saw this on the shelf, and I ended up picking it up just because I was like, hey, I've never read Aesop's Fables, and decided to read it kind of cover to cover. So this is the signature classics version. You can get it at Barnes & Noble for $10.95. It's pretty interesting. Cover design where they have the tortoise and the hare on the front. It says Aesop's Fables is the signature classics version. On the back they've got a similar cover, and I think they've got a quote on the back that says slow and steady wins the race, which is the classic moral of the story from the tortoise and the hare. This version is pretty simple. What it essentially has is, as you can tell here, it has each of the stories. It'll have a title at the top and then the actual text for the story, which is usually about like a couple paragraphs to upwards of a page, and then at the bottom there's going to be the moral of the story, and then interspersed throughout the entire book is these illustrations, which are very like classic kind of pen and ink black and white illustrations, which they depict the story and the kind of general synopsis of the story every 3 to 4 pages throughout the book. So if you look here, here's another one right here. And so that's the general take of what the book looks like. It is kind of structured so that every single story is back to back, which is nice and convenient. It's not like they don't pull out the stories onto individual pages, so it's nice that it's more concise and succinct compared to like different stories where they pull these out and kind of put an illustration paired towards it, which is really what you see with like the children's version of this. A little bit background on Aesop's Fables. So Aesop's Fables is really a tribute to Aesop, who was a slave and storyteller around the Greek time period. And over the time period of like 2,000 years, these stories have come together as a compilation of stories which encompass like simple, basic stories that focus on life lessons that we encounter on a regular basis. And then it encompasses a story and as well as a moral of the story. And then all these stories are really geared or centered around animals with humanistic qualities. You'll have like the hare, you'll have the tortoise, you'll have the lion, you'll have the monkey, you'll have the donkey, you'll have the foxes, wolves, dogs, you'll have humans, you'll have hunters, you'll have the huntsman. There's all these different variations. You'll have frogs, and all of them have their unique qualities and characteristics, and in general like behaviors and actions that they do that kind of are repeated on a regular basis that kind of run into the same course. So regardless, like from one story to the next, if you read these back to back, you get a lot of context out of it, and you kind of see the same themes over and over again, which is very useful. I will say that there are the kind of like the classic stories like the tortoise or the hare and the miser that you really know about, but there's a lot of these stories when I was reading it that through my parents growing up, they would kind of tell a moral story, or there would be a theme related to it that they kind of like guided towards, but they never actually attributed to Aesop. And after reading this, I'm like, oh, that's probably where my parents told me that from, or that lesson was from that. So it was really interesting to see that kind of at this day and age. In general, I will say also that some of these stories are not really tailored to or appropriate for children. They are, some of them are pretty grotesque and gruesome. There's a lot of instances where an animal is killed, like the huntsman kills the dog or wrings out its neck or something like that, and the terminology is pretty devastating. So I would be very cautious with reading these just arbitrarily to your children from like one story to the next, if you're doing it in that format, simply because you do have to kind of read it ahead of time just in case, so that you know it's age appropriate for your child. So that's that. I'd say that in general, Aesop's Fable, you have to read it at some point in your lifetime, because so much of our basic life lessons and things like that come from these stories, and you don't necessarily know that. So I think that at some point in your life, you should just sit down, read these from start to finish, get a general inkling, and it's a very easy, simple read. I mean, each story is about a paragraph, 2 paragraphs long. You get a concise story, and then you kind of like get the moral of the story very quickly. So there is some value in it. I will say that after reading it back to back, it kind of does wash them down a little bit, where if you read it as like one book in its entirety, you don't get the whole like morals over time. It kind of just blends into one. What I'll do now is I'll just kind of just pick a story. So we're just going to pick this one. I just opened it up to it just for an example. So this is, and I'll just read it, The Fox and the Boar. So this is a good example of just kind of something you might not even know about. So The Fox and the Boar. The boar stood whetting his tusks against an old tree. The fox, who happened to come by at the same time, asked him why he made those martial preparations of whetting his teeth, since there was no enemy near that he could perceive. That may be, Master Fox, that may be, Master Fox, said the boar, but we should scour up our arms while we have leisure, you know, for in time of danger we shall have something else to do. And the moral of the story is the discreet man should have a reserve of everything that is necessary before the time comes for him to make use of them. So essentially it's like going back to the old age tale, like prepare for war in time of peace type of thing. So it's interesting. And actually here, as you can see, is the illustration related to that. I just randomly picked this, but as you can see, so that shows the boar and the fox and the tree there. So that's kind of an example. We'll do one more just so you can kind of get a gist of it. Here's this other random one. So it says The Dog and the Oyster. So we'll just read this. So The Dog and the Oyster. A dog used to eating eggs saw an oyster, and opening his mouth to its widest extent, swallowed it down with the utmost relish. Supposing it to be an egg, soon afterwards, suffering great pain in his stomach, he said, I deserve all this torment for my folly in thinking that everything round must be an egg. And so the moral is, they who act without sufficient thought will often fall into unsuspected danger. And so that's the gist of all these stories. I thought it was a quick, pleasurable experience as far as reading these. It's unique with the different images, the stories, like the fact that it's repeated with different animals over and over. So I think that's all we have for this video. So that is Aesop's Fables, the Barnes & Noble edition. You can get it for $10.95 online or in their store. If you have questions, comments, anything like that, you can just post them below. And as always, if you like this video, please like it. And if you want to watch more content related to my book reviews, you can click the subscribe button now. So thanks for watching and have a great day.